Alright people, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification. That way you'll know when I upload the next video and you'll be supporting my channel. Follow me on Twitter. Every time I upload a new video, I'll be tweeting. Ladies and gents, welcome to Reacts, and this is Trope Talk Ancient Superweapons by the channel Only Sarcastic production. If you think this is just an excuse for me to talk about my favorite Ghibli movie, of course I know what that is. Yeah, you're right. What's your favorite ancient superweapon? Argue in the comments. Superweapons? Ancient superweapons. I don't know. Trebuchets, things like that. Are they considered superweapons? I don't know. It's gonna be a fun video. I haven't done Trope Talk or any OSP video for a good enough time now, so I'm like, what the hell? Let's do this. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like, subscribe, so I know which type of videos to react to more. Check out other reaction. There's a link in the description. Check out the cards, check out the end cards, and yeah, let's watch it.
This video was sponsored by World Anvil, which in retrospect absolutely sounds like the name of an ancient superweapon that cracked the moon in half.
Yes.
Everyone loves a MacGuffin. That's literally central to the definition. A MacGuffin is a plot device that drives the plot only by being a thing everybody wants.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the MacGuffin actually is or what it does, just to what lengths the characters are willing to go to get it. That's why, despite the popularity of the term, some plot devices aren't MacGuffins. Sometimes what the plot device can do is actually central to the plot, and there are very few more illustrative examples of this than the ancient superweapon. This is a very specific plot device with a very simple premise. An ancient advanced civilization or a visionary way ahead of their time produced a powerful weapon of some kind which was then lost to history. Modern power-hungry people are now searching for this ancient superweapon for usually evil conquest purposes. It is almost 100%
I don't know, like the Avengers Gauntlet, Infinity Stones, yeah.
guaranteed that by the end of the story, the ancient superweapon will either be destroyed or lost again, even harder this time, to avoid falling into the wrong hands. The associated moral is almost always that this weapon is simply too dangerous to exist. Sometimes it's even explicit that the ancient superweapon caused the destruction of the ancient civilization that created it in the first place, and while absolute power might very well sound good on paper, unleashing it will end very badly for anyone involved. Now, there's many different flavors of ancient superweapons, some more twisty than others, but they almost always follow the exact same general plot structure, which goes like this. First, the villain or villains learn of the existence of the ancient superweapon. This is the inciting incident. If the heroes are looking for the ancient superweapon too, it'll be because of the archaeological implications or because they don't know that it's a weapon. It's generally unheroic to want a powerful weapon, so they're not allowed to be searching for it for power hunger reasons. The villains start looking for the ancient superweapon, possibly looping the heroes in along the way. Maybe they kidnap them, trick them into helping, etc., etc. If the villains don't force their involvement, the heroes will be looking for it on their own. And as a corollary, lots of heroes seem to think something like, if we get the MacGuffin first, we can protect it from the villain, but usually the villain just waits for them to disarm all the crazy traps and get through the riddles guarding the thing before swooping in with, like, regular guns and taking it. It's an oddly common trope considering
Yes. Why is that so common? I've seen that in so many places. I mean, heroes go through planning and fucking planning of things. Goes at ridiculous lengths that makes our viewers, audiences basically think, oh, isn't that awesome? And then in the end, they just come up with some kind of a 9mm pistol. Yeah, see, now we're gonna take that. This is ridiculous. I mean, this reminds me of super weapon thing, reminds me of that Nazi thing, right? People say there was a bell type of thing, Nazi bell, that was never completely developed, or even if it did, it never got, in use or something. Which is a, weird earthquake machine type of thing, which is a massive bell buried somewhere. And if, basically Hitler gives the order or whatever, the bell is launched, then, basically earthquake happens and, massive scale, like, I don't know, 8, 9 scale level of earthquake happens and the towns and things just collapse or something. I don't know, there's a real saying like that. I'm pretty sure I saw one of the Dark 5 videos on that too, long ago. I don't remember exactly. But yeah, it's weird to see that even in our real world, like with Nazis, there's a such thing as that. Right? I mean, somebody can easily make a movie based on that. Why are they not doing that? Like, chasing this super weapon. Whole movie is all about that. Spies and shit, basically, in Nazi Germany.
considering how broadly unwise it is. Next, the villains inevitably acquire control of the ancient superweapon, frequently during the Darkest Hour plot beat. Expect villainous gloating in damseled protagonists, and if the weapon has a twist, it will be revealed here. Maybe the villain will unleash the superweapon only to find it's something completely uncontrollable, like an instant face melter or a nanite gray goo scenario, or a super plague that takes them out first. Or maybe the ancient superweapon is actually sentient and turns into an even bigger villain. There's about a 50-50 shot the villain will be able to control what they unleash, but either way, the heroes oppose this new threat, whether that's the newly newly powered up villain using the superweapon or the unleashed superweapon itself. Finally, the heroes succeed and the superweapon is destroyed, often by turning the weapon on itself so it self-destructs. A lesson is learned by all, except the villain, who is almost always dead at this point. Now, this is a very specific plot structure, but it makes a lot of sense. The heroes need a reason to want to find the superweapon, otherwise the villains will just get a hold of it and wreak havoc unopposed. And the hero's reason usually can't be too selfish, since that'd be intrinsically unheroic of them, so unless they're bordering on villain protagonist status, they can't be seeking the weapon for weapon purposes. Either they want it for their own reasons, or the villains get them involved for their nefarious reasons.
I mean, obviously that used to be the case, but I guess in today's culture, newer movies, things has to be dark and cynical and somewhat edgier, right? So in today's world, basically, if somebody makes a movie out of it, something, there'll be a plot twist that shows you that, hero had some personal agenda to fight, find the weapon. Not evil one, probably, but still personal. Not just, I guess, selfless type of thing. No, it's personal agenda. I don't know why that's edgy nowadays. What, people are asshole? That's edgy?
The villain almost always succeeds in getting the superweapon because it's more interesting for the villain to get a third act power-up than it would be for them to fail, although some Shaggy Dog stories end that way, so it's not like it's unheard of. The heroes oppose the newly powered-up villain or other new threat because that's what heroes do, and the superweapon is usually destroyed because it's so massively powerful and destructive that the implication is it'd always be at risk of falling into the wrong hands. All of these plot beats follow naturally from the basic structure of the premise and the format. Now, there is some internal variation depending on how exactly the superweapon works. As mentioned, if the weapon has a twist about it, it'll usually be revealed when the villain first gets their hands on it. It's fairly common for the weapon to have some kind of unexpected property. For instance, maybe the weapon is actually an ancient and powerful being that was sealed away or sleeping, and the process of unleashing it is a bit more like waking up Cthulhu than getting a nice clean space laser to point at your enemies. In extreme cases, the villain might actually fight the newly unleashed ancient evil, recognizing its bigger fish status and trying to shut it down before it's too late. On the flip side, sometimes the ancient superweapon isn't what the characters expect at all. Maybe it's broken, or eroded with time, or it's an innocent person, or just overall not a weapon they can use. In extreme cases, it flat out kills the first person who unseals it, but in more disappointing cases, it just doesn't work. This is also bordering on MacGuffin status and is overall less exciting than if the weapon is actually dangerous, so it's less common than the spicy variants. In fact, it's much more common for the weapon to be way more dangerous than anyone anticipated. This helps answer the structural question of, hey, if this weapon is so powerful, why is the civilization that made it in ruins and not ruling the world right now? The simplest answer is that the civilization either couldn't unleash it or did so much damage unleashing it that they collapsed. This ties into a really fun space of tropes.
Yeah, that is so true, isn't it? If this weapon is so powerful, why isn't the civilization that had it is not ruling the world? Yeah, it was so powerful, the civilization is fucking destroyed. It was that powerful. Damn, that is so true.
About lost civilizations and hubris and apocalyptic collapses, and sometimes if the story is feeling real generous, we'll get something like an apocalypse log, wherein the ancient civilization left a written record or audio logs of how the ancient superweapon was so unexpectedly crazy deadly that everything went to shit the minute it switched on. These stories usually have very on-the-nose narratives about hubris and power hunger and the poignant tragedy of a great civilization crumbling under its own achievement. Sometimes this is actually too on the nose, so instead of a blatant narration of the apocalyptic downfall of civilization, we'll just get these themes through environmental storytelling instead. Murals or legends or just part of the background design that show the scars of an ancient cataclysm. Now, all that said, this is nowhere near the only story you can tell about an ancient superweapon. It's probably the simplest one, but there's plenty of room for variation. For instance, sometimes the ancient superweapon isn't hidden, it's completely forgotten. Ancient lost civilizations sometimes get new civilizations built on top of them, using their now forgotten and arcane technology for new mundane purposes with no idea what they used to do. Sometimes ancient ruins will be half buried in long deactivated factory production lines, or magical life-giving crystals will be ancient super advanced technology, or crumbling statues will be rusted robots. In this format, instead of chasing down a lost weapon, typically someone rediscovers the purpose of this ancient tech or a living relic from that ancient civilization.
That is such a common trope, that what she just said, right? Many places had that kind of thing. The game Mass Effect Andromeda had that thing when they arrived there. The forgotten civilization was powerful, remnants or whatever that was, and lots of different basically shows, movies, even games has this kind of thing. Like, oh, look at that ancient civilization, they were really powerful. Assassin's Creed has that. The Adam's apple and whatever that is, but basically everything like that. It's apple, and then I don't know was that a cloak in Assassin's Creed? I don't remember exactly, something like that. So that kind of trope is pretty fucking common. That civilizations are so powerful, but they somehow disappear or something. Now we have to rediscover the purpose. Even in the Warhammer 40k universe, right? In the current universe, in 41st millennia, nobody knows how things work, but they just do, and all the science is forgotten. They could basically, dig all different type of relic sites and discover technologies that were lost. That's a great premise there too.
Civilization reboots that ancient tech that the rest of the world forgot about, or the characters just stumble on the half-broken but still very dangerous remnants of that ancient weaponry. In this form, the trope helps add depth to the setting by introducing a layer of ancient advanced civilization lost to time and decay, and even implies that the current world is technically post-apocalyptic, a low-tech feudal world balanced on the forgotten ruins of a thriving ancient empire. The exact nature of the weapon or the tech depends entirely on the setting and what the writer wants to do with it, but ancient robots are extremely common and ancient space lasers are just about as common. Depending on the execution, this trope also has occasional shades of eldritch horror, and it's not really all that surprising. Ancient superweapon can mean a lot of things, but the definition does require it to be ancient and dangerous, two key factors shared by most eldritch horrors. Some ancient superweapons are pretty basic by superweapon standards, like a really big gun, but some of them are a lot more unnerving, either due to their inherent nature or the effect they had on the civilization that created them. Sometimes in the process of uncovering the ancient superweapon, the characters piece together the story of how it became lost technology in the first place, which is often apocalyptically tragic. This applies even in stories where the characters don't realize there's a weapon involved. They might think they're just on a generic MacGuffin hunt looking for treasure or archaeologically significant discoveries, only to learn that the ruins they're exploring were wrecked by something very dangerous, often the very MacGuffin they're after. Ancient superweapons frequently have very strong narrative themes about the dangers of toying with forces beyond human comprehension and unleashing something ultimately unstoppable. See, the ultimate question of the ancient superweapon is, if it's so powerful, why didn't its creators win? Why aren't they ruling the world as we speak with an ancient superweapon mounted on every satellite? This question can be answered a lot of different ways, but the implications are almost always tragic. In some stories, the ancient superweapon didn't win because it was so deadly destructive that it made the world broadly uninhabitable until things eventually recovered. Essentially, the people who fired the weapon had so much trouble staying alive after that they couldn't reap the tactical benefits anyway. In these stories, remnants of the ancient superweapon are the
in the Elder Scrolls lore, that's the case with the dwarves, right? Dwarves were such advanced species. They tried to become god or something. They found a certain, to try to find certain technology or something, and then they just disappeared. Did they become a god? Or they just, I guess, touched something, technology or something, a super weapon type of thing that was way too much even for them. The whole civilization got destroyed.
The damage it did often linger in the form of fallout, toxins, half-buried ruins, or the occasional half-dead killer robot. These stories are often sneakily post-apocalyptic. It might or might not be obvious from the visual design, but the characters usually don't fully register the implications of the fact that they're living in the ruins of the old world. And anyone hunting for old world weapons risks unleashing something literally apocalyptic if they manage to get the thing working again. Now that's probably the most extreme case. In lighter versions, the ancient superweapons just didn't win because it was specifically destructive to the people who used it. Maybe it glitched and went out of control, or it was sentient and didn't approve of how people were trying to use it, or it just had a really nasty recoil. It doesn't need to have been apocalyptically bad, just actively harmful to use. This is how you get self-disposing superweapons, where the bad guy powers it up and it basically immediately disintegrates them. Now in some cases, the weapon's not even all that bad. It does what it's supposed to, and it's pretty much totally safe for the user. The problem is the civilization that created it realized something like, this is way too much power for anyone to have, the world just isn't ready, and abandoned the concept, usually hiding the superweapon behind a nice array of traps to make sure nobody trips over it. This implies that the ancient civilization in question was fairly self-aware, but does beg the question of why they built it in the first place.
Come on, man. Look, that kind of shit would never happen in the real world, right? If somebody develops some kind of a powerful ancient weapon, first of all, whatever government or empire is there at the moment would be on their neck constantly to see where the progress is going on, if they are even attempting to make a super weapon. And once they do, the people who made it probably wouldn't have much say in it, like if someone should have this power or not. And once somebody has that kind of a weapon or anything like powerful like that, no way in hell they won't put it in use in any way, right? Even the nicest civilization who are not really threatening, if they accidentally make something really powerful, they would go on, raiding rampages, right? Taking over other empires and things like that. Even they would do that.
and then why they didn't destroy it when they realized it was bad. Lots of superweapons aren't exactly designed to be weapons, but can easily be repurposed that way, usually with disastrous results. This is often used for a general anti-war message, which is honestly very common with ancient superweapon plots. Almost no story goes for the actually having an ancient superweapon straight up rules moral. Usually the weapon is bad. I also feel like we gotta highlight a unique case of this trope because there's something very funny about the One Ring. In Lord of the Rings, the ring functions—
Yeah, okay, wait a minute. Okay, I get it what he says, that, there is no plot that's basically uses the super weapon and makes the people who uses them rule the world. But understand what you're saying. It's a super weapon, right? The implication is here that nobody can touch it. That's how powerful this super weapon is. If somebody uses and rules the world, that's the end. What's the story now? Your hero cannot possibly be more powerful than the super weapon or do something to, I guess, overthrow people who has that super weapon. So you have to have some kind of plot where somebody didn't use the super weapon or can't use the super weapon, or basically you have to stop them before using the super weapon. Because if you use super weapon, you literally dominate the world. The stocks are, all the things are stocks way against the hero, I guess. Stacks against the hero. So like somebody basically used the super weapon and took over the world and world as an empire. Now that evil person has the entire world as an empire. How are heroes supposed to tackle that?
Somewhat similar to a MacGuffin. A lot of people want it, and it doesn't play a very active role in the story. This in spite of the fact that it's technically the most powerful weapon in the world. The power of the One Ring is to control the other rings of power, and by extension, the people wearing them, and by further extension, all the races of Middle-earth. Other than that, what the ring can actually do is vague. Turns the wearer invisible, sure, but also maybe makes them scarier and evil, and it lets them live longer, but it totally wrecks their dental work in the process. But allegedly, if someone actually strong got it, it'd be a very different story. But that vagueness and apparent general use—
Wait a minute, isn't it that if anybody but Sauron wears the ring, they go invisible and don't do much? Because that ring is supposed to be Sauron's. But in the hand of Sauron, that ring is way too powerful. That would give Sauron much more power or something. Or maybe it will bring Sauron and materialize on this world or something, right? That's the case. Sauron cannot come to the, world of, Mordor or whatever this is, right? The ring would do that. But if anybody wears the ring, that would basically make them invisible and tell them to go to the owner, basically Sauron. That's what the invisibility is for, that they can easily get to the objective. Nobody can intervene. I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Doesn't stop everyone from trying to get it. Sauron included, who made the classic villain mistake of dumping a lot of his power into it when he made it, significantly nerfing himself. Boromir and Isildur both end up tempted by the ring, which was presumably whispering promises of military might and Snickers bars for everyone, considering the thing doesn't really seem to work for anyone but Sauron. The story does talk a big game about how someone sufficiently powerful could become even more scary and dangerous with the ring, but we never really see that happen. Everyone who gets the ring posts Sauron as a weak-willed human or a hobbit, and all the ring does for them is make them glower menacingly at the camera and usually die. It's entirely possible that the One Ring is just a very effective con artist, promising wealth and power and Snickers bars as it hitchhikes its way back onto Sauron's finger. That doesn't stop everyone from treating it like the scariest weapon in the world, it's just very funny to think about. Guess this goes to show that show don't tell isn't actually a cardinal rule. Now, we've touched on how some superweapons are sentient, but that really warrants a little more exploration. It's one thing to have a superweapon with an AI attached, even a potentially neutral or benevolent one, but sometimes superweapons aren't just sentient, they're villains in their own right. In this story format, the villain was typically ridiculously dangerous and powerful back in the day, but has since been either sealed away or gone dormant some other way, possibly even being dead. The classic newbie weapon-seeking villain goes looking for power without realizing that that power comes attached to another villain who's probably not going to be too inclined to share. Depending on how bad things get, the initial weapon-seeking villain might even end up teaming up with the good guys to try and stop the newly unleashed problem. In this story format, rather than the forgotten superweapon powering up the villain, it ends up supplanting the villain in the threat hierarchy. All the same destructive power, but basically no chance of controlling it. These stories tend to be a lot less theme-heavy than the weapon versions. A powerful ancient villain is kind of more basic and less emotionally loaded than a powerful ancient weapon. The mystery element is also lacking. With an ancient superweapon, there's always going to be the question of what went wrong to cause it to be lost or sealed away, but an ancient powerful bad guy is pretty self-explanatory. These stories have a notably different third act than the stock superweapon plot. Instead of getting the weapon away from the villain and or destroying it, the heroes have to either somehow destroy the newly unleashed supervillain or find a way to seal them back up. As a result, these stories usually focus more on how the villain was defeated and sealed the first time than spin on the villain themselves. It might seem kind of counterintuitive that replacing a non-sentient plot device with a sentient character ends up with less narrative oomph, but the fact is there's a lot of very juicy themes you can explore with an ancient and highly destructive superweapon, but there's only like 2 themes with ancient super strong villains. They don't tend to have much in the way of personality either. This might be because if they had any motivation beyond pure evil, there probably would have been an easier way to deal with them than sealing them away for centuries. They could have negotiated or something. In order for a villain to be sealed away and potentially forgotten for long enough that some errant newbie mistakes them for a power-up MacGuffin and digs them up, the villain usually needs to be way too powerful to deal with any other way and way too basic to handle through any sort of character-specific approach like negotiations, appeals to their morals, loved ones, honor codes, etc. That basically leaves us with a
basically all super weapon, when they consume it, whatever, super weapon turns them into unnegotiable, I guess, an entity, pure evil entity that is beyond reason now, right? The evil became super weapon in itself, so I guess that is no other option now to seal the, I guess, evil away.
A walking malevolent superweapon with no other priorities than mass destruction. Our heroes can either seal them away again, or they can muster up enough protagonist power to actually kill them, usually in some kind of epic final battle. It's fine, and it leads to some pretty rad-looking boss fights, but it's really not that nuanced, and you don't get the same kind of rock-solid theming you get when the superweapon is actually just a weapon. It's like the sealed problem is made less interesting by being given the bare minimum personality and motivation. I gotta say, I've got a real soft spot for these stories. I like how old and interesting they make the world feel, and they're also often very melancholy, meditations on greed and self-destructive power hunger and the overall futility of conflict. I don't think this is just because the last few years have felt like one apocalypse after another, so the genre overall is hitting different. I honestly think this is a very universal story structure. History moves in cycles and everything dies eventually, and it's impossible to predict what it'll leave behind when it goes. The story structure of an ancient weapon of mass destruction outliving the civilization that created it is just a meditation on destruction.
Oh god, imagine if civilization gets destroyed tomorrow, but not the most of the structure survives, and some civilization rises far in the future. Whatever structures are left, probably skyscrapers will still be there, right? Hopefully. I mean, the new civilization, like how we see Roman civilization and all the aqueducts and shit, how the new civilization would see all the fucking, skyscrapers and shit, like holy shit. And they don't even have any idea how to make them.
Destruction itself. And it might be tempting to read into the angsty doomer side of this trope, to draw connections to scary things like nuclear weaponry and climate change and other far-reaching destructive consequences to things we didn't fully understand when we unleashed them. But I like to focus on the flip side of this trope. Things grow back. Things did get very bad, civilization-destroyingly bad, but life never stopped moving forward. The villains of these stories are always looking back, grabbing for bright bursts of flashy power and ignoring the context that created them in the first place, the lessons of history plainly written on the mausoleum walls. The heroes look forward towards growth in life, small-scale tangible victories that matter on the personal scale. This aesthetic is found very strongly in Ghibli movies, and it's no coincidence that the terrifying apocalyptic threats of ancient and overwhelming horror are faced down by cheerful cottagecore protagonists who make breakfast in the morning and spend their days in bright, cluttered homes with their loved ones. Both sides of the story are all—
That's that kind of mentality, like, you could chase the power, right? You could have some kind of a narcissism that you can do what others before you couldn't, right? So it's not like you are oblivious to the history, like this didn't work, how am I going to make work? You're narcissist, I can't do it if others can't. And your basic hunger power that you think it will fulfill you, that once you get that power you'll be happy or whatever, that doesn't matter. While hero being zen, let's just say, enjoying small thing of life, eating breakfast, things like that, don't caring about power much, seeing the bigger picture eventually, like none of this power hungry shit matters.
Always true. The horror of the past is real, but so is the future. And in the end, the past is always buried, and the heroes move into the future as best they can. It's melancholic and uplifting all at once. The only direction anyone can ever move is forward. So, yeah. And thanks again to World Anvil for sponsoring this video. World Anvil is, of course, a browser-based writing and world-building tool designed to help—
Yeah, we'll go to worldanvil.com/Sarcastic and support Sarcastic channel, Sarcastic Productions. So yeah, this was a good trope talk, right? Ancient super weapons. In real world, ancient super weapons, I guess, what were they? I don't know, real that we know of. I guess trebuchets and things like that. I don't know what. That one's really super weapons, right? I don't know. Greed. Greed was a super weapon, I guess, right? Using religion. Religion was a super weapon. Anybody can use religion, any way they want. Write certain things here and there and say that's God's word, and there you go. So yeah, Right, well, that was Trope Talk, Ancient Super Weapons by the channel Oli Sarcastic production. If you liked my reaction, don't forget to subscribe so I know which type of videos to react to more, I guess. If I should react to, more Trope Talk now or what. Check out the reaction, there's a link in the description. Check out the cast, check out the end cards. Yeah, I'll see you next time.